The lights in Sacramento stay on longer than they do in San Francisco, but that just means you get a front row seat to the collapse of the Central Valley. World War III won't start with a flash on the Capitol steps. It starts with a quiet friction in the Delta that eventually starves every grocery shelf from Roseville to Elk Grove. If you live here, you've been told the rivers and the local power grid make the city a fortress. That's a dangerous half-truth. When Pacific shipping lanes tighten and the national grid starts taking hits, being the capital of the world's fifth largest economy doesn't make you a priority. It makes you a target for systemic exhaustion. Here are 5 civilian impacts of a global conflict, ranked from the slow burn strain to the total breakdown of daily life in the 916. For this analysis, we assume a high-intensity maritime conflict has disrupted the West Coast, causing fuel volatility and massive logistics friction across the inland heart of California. Number 5. The state worker ghost town. In the early weeks of a global conflict, the most visible change isn't a riot. It's the sudden, eerie silence of the downtown core. Sacramento's heartbeat is the state government. This is a massive machine that employs over 100,000 people in the metro area. You might think a war makes government more active, but for the average civilian employee, it often means a total freeze. The hidden stabilizer here is the sheer inertia of the bureaucracy. The state will try to keep the lights on and the checks flowing to maintain the illusion of order. But the catch is the state's budget. When the federal government pivots all resources to a war footing, the massive flow of federal dollars that sustains California's social programs and infrastructure projects dries up overnight. Look at the skyline around 10th and L Street. When the state triggers its emergency continuity plans, non-essential personnel are sent home indefinitely to save on building overhead and fuel. If you're a local business owner or a family depending on that state salary, the sudden evaporation of foot traffic in certain pay cycles creates an immediate local recession. The wrong move is waiting for a formal announcement that things are back to normal. The better play is to assume that continuity of government only applies to the people in the bunkers, not the people in the cubicles. If you're a state worker, verify your union's emergency strike or furlough protocols tonight. The moment the first cyber attack hits the state's payroll servers, your direct deposit becomes a theoretical concept. This ranks at number 5 because it's a slow, grinding economic pain, but it doesn't immediately stop the water from flowing. Number 4. The I-80 freight freeze. Sacramento is the throat of Northern California's logistics. Everything moving from the Port of Oakland to the rest of the country passes through the I-80 and Business 80 corridor. The myth is that being on a major transit line keeps you supplied. The reality is that in a global conflict, those roads aren't for you anymore. They become prioritized military and essential resource corridors. The hidden stabilizer is the Port of Sacramento. Having an inland link to the bay is a massive asset, but the bottleneck is the fuel. When Pacific shipping friction sends diesel prices to $10 a gallon, the just-in-time delivery model for local grocery stores in Citrus Heights or Folsom snaps. You see it at the loading docks. A typical Raley's or Safeway only has about 3 days of fresh inventory. The moment the trucking companies start prioritizing state-mandated essential shipments over civilian consumer goods, your local store becomes a museum of empty shelves. The proof is in the sheer volume of the big rig traffic you see every day at the 8099 interchange. That traffic represents the literal lifeblood of the city. If that flow slows by even 20%, the competition for what's left becomes fierce. Most people will spend their remaining fuel driving from store to store looking for milk or medicine. Don't be that guy. The better move is to secure a 90-day deep pantry of dry goods before the first headlines even break. If you're in Sacramento tonight, pull up a map. Identify at least 3 secondary routes that don't rely on the major freeways to get you to high ground or out of the metro area. When the freight stops, the roads become parking lots for stalled trucks and desperate commuters. Number 3. The SMUD Island Paradox. We love SMUD. Compared to the nightmare that is PG&E, Sacramento Municipal Utility District is a model of reliability. It's community-owned, it has its own generation assets, and it's generally more resilient. That's the paradox. It makes us feel safe when we aren't. In a war scenario, Sacramento becomes a bright spot on a dark map. As the wider California ISO grid faces rolling blackouts from cyber attacks or fuel shortages at natural gas plants, SMUD will fight to keep the local lights on. The hidden stabilizer is our local hydroelectric and solar mix, but the friction is the heat. Sacramento is a heat island. If a conflict hits during a July heat wave, the demand on the local grid will be astronomical as people from surrounding PG&E territories flee into the city looking for cooled spaces. The proof is in the transformers. Even a resilient grid has physical limits. When you have 100,000 people suddenly straining a local system because the surrounding regions are dark, the island starts to sink. The catch is that SMUD still depends on the wider Western interconnection for balancing instability. If the national grid takes a hard hit, SMUD can't just disconnect and stay perfect. They'll have to shed load to keep the equipment from melting. The wrong move is assuming your AC will run forever just because you're in a SMUD zone. The better move is to invest in a heavy-duty portable power station and high-quality window tints or blackout curtains now. If the grid stutters during a 110-degree week, your house becomes a kiln in 6 hours. Number 2. The Delta Siphon. Everything in Sacramento depends on the American and Sacramento rivers. We sit at the confluence of the two most important water veins in the state. You think that makes us water rich. In reality, it makes us the custodians of a system that everyone else in California wants to take. The Delta is the most delicate inland water system in the country. In a high-intensity conflict, the demand for water for Southern California's agriculture and coastal cities will become a matter of national security. The hidden stabilizer is our senior water rights. Sacramento technically gets first dibs, but the ugly vulnerability is the infrastructure. Our water treatment plants rely on a complex dance of chemicals and electricity to keep the taps safe. Look at the map. If the pumps in the Delta are compromised by cyber intrusion, or if the chemical supply chain for chlorine and alum is disrupted by the Pacific shipping freeze, the water coming out of your tap becomes a liability. The proof is in the sheer age of some of our levee and pumping systems. They aren't built for a high-intensity cyber war. If the treatment plant goes down, it doesn't matter how much river water is flowing past your house. It is not drinkable. The catch is that the state will likely prioritize Delta exports to keep the Southern California economy from collapsing. This happens potentially at the expense of local pressure. Most residents will wait for the boil water notice. The better move is to have a high-capacity gravity filter and at least 50 gallons of stored water per person right now.
Number 1. The logistics blind spot. Ranked as the most dangerous daily life breakdown in Sacramento is the normalcy bias of the suburban provider. Because we have the rivers, the state government, and SMUD, the average Sacramento father believes this city is a safe harbor. That belief is the single greatest point of failure. The mechanism is simple. When the crisis hits, the people who felt the safest wait the longest to act. In a war scenario, the window between everything is fine and the bridges are closed is measured in hours. Sacramento is a city of bridges and choke points. If you're in Natomas and the I-5 and 80 bridges are blocked, you're on an island. If you're in Elk Grove and the 99 is jammed, you're trapped in a suburban grid with no easy way out. This beats the water crisis in ranking because your mindset dictates your ability to use your gear. The proof is in the traffic every Friday afternoon on the WX freeway. If a normal weekend can paralyze this city, a panicked evacuation or a citywide power failure will turn our streets into a trap. The hidden stabilizer is the community. Sacramento has a lot of capable, grounded people, but the friction is the delay. The wrong move is waiting for the emergency alert on your phone to tell you it's time to move or hunker down. By the time that alert goes out, the options ladder has already lost its bottom rungs. The better move is to establish a trigger point. This is a specific event, like a multi-day blackout or a declared maritime blockade, that means you stop talking and start executing your plan. If you're in Sacramento tonight, go to your garage and check your fuel levels. Most men in this city roll around with a quarter tank, thinking there's always a gas station on the next corner. In a major conflict, that gas station will be empty or cash only within 4 hours of the first major escalation. Number 1 isn't a place or a piece of gear. It's the realization that Sacramento's buffers are thin, and the safety you feel is just latency in the system. When the clock starts, the man who understands the logistics wins. The man who trusts the system loses. Survival in the capital isn't about having the most ammo. It's about understanding the friction of the valley. If you can manage your own power, secure your own water, and stay ahead of the logistics curve, you become the exception to the statistic. If you want signal on how to read these systems before they fail, subscribe. If you want noise, scroll. Check your locks, check your water. Be ready.